The rain of Viridia City's dockyards had a special kind of filth to it. It wasn't the clean, earth-scented rain of the forests her pack once called home. This was a chemical cocktail, tasting of diesel fumes, rust, and the greasy discharge from the nearby fish cannery. To a human, it was a nuisance. To Celine Fang, it was a sensory assault. She stood under the flickering halogen lamp of Warehouse 7, the cold drizzle plastering strands of her silver hair to her temples. The official police barricade, a flimsy yellow tape that read SDU, Supernatural Chinese Unit, snapped in the wind, a useless gesture. She'd slipped under it 20 minutes ago, long before the first sirens had begun to wail in the distance. They were always too slow. Inside, the air was thick with the coppery tang of blood. It was a smell she knew intimately, in all its variations: the hot spray of a fresh wound, the slow seep of a mortal injury, and this, the cold, flat scent of life long since spilled onto a concrete floor. The victim, or what was left of him, lay in the center of the vast, empty space. Another wolf. The third one in as many months. Young, strong, from the look of his broad shoulders and the powerful set of his jaw, now slack in death. He'd been trained, not in the messy, frenzied way of a fledgling vampire, but with a chilling, clinical precision. His skin was pale and sunken, clinging to his bones like parchment. It was a husk, a vessel empty of its vital contents. Celine knelt, her tactical boots silent on the gritty floor. She ignored the visual horror. It was a distraction. She closed her eyes, tilting her head back, and listened, not with her ears, but with her nose. She filtered through the layers of scent, cataloging them with the precision of a master sommelier. Brine from the nearby sea, wet concrete, rat droppings in the corner, the pervasive stench of spilled motor oil, and blood. So much blood. Underneath it all, the faint, lingering pheromones of sheer terror from the victim's last moments. But there was something else. Something wrong. The killer had been clean. Too clean. They had used bleach, or something like it, to scrub the area. The acrid chemical scent burned at the back of her throat, a clumsy attempt to erase their tracks. But they had failed, because they were trying to fool a human nose, not hers. Beneath the bleach, beneath everything, was a ghost of a fragrance. It was faint, almost imperceptible, clinging to the air like a forgotten memory. Celine inhaled deeply, her lupine senses stretching, pushing past the overwhelming odors to isolate the anomaly. It was floral, but a dead floral. The scent of roses, not fresh from a garden, but brittle and dry, preserved for decades in a sealed room. And woven through it was a sharp, synthetic undertone, something akin to formaldehyde. Rot and roses. The signature. It was the same as the other two scenes. An artificial, cloying perfume of decay, a deliberate mockery of life. It was the only clue they'd left behind. And she was the only one in this godforsaken city who could smell it. A pang of familiar agony twisted in her gut. Her brother, Liam, had been investigating the first disappearance when he vanished himself nearly a year ago. The SCU had closed his case, labeling him a runaway, a defector. But Celine knew better. He had smelled something on the wind, something dangerous, and it had swallowed him whole. This scent, this was Liam's trail, gone cold for months, now blazing hot once more. Headlights cut through the warehouse's grimy windows, sweeping across the grim tableau. The squeal of tires on wet asphalt announced the arrival of the city's finest. Finally, Celine rose, melting back into the shadows behind a stack of rotting pallets. She wasn't here to play nice with the authorities. She was here for answers they were too blind or too unwilling to find. The heavy metal doors groaned open, and a figure stepped inside, framed by the downpour. He didn't wear the standard SCU tactical gear. Instead, he was dressed in a tailored black suit that probably cost more than her entire apartment. It fit him like a second skin, repelling the rain with an unnatural ease. His shoes, gleaming black leather, clicked with unnerving authority on the concrete as he strode in, followed by a team of uniformed officers who immediately began setting up floodlights. Detective Damien Valerius, heir to the most powerful vampire clan in the city, prince of the Valerius Coven, and the notoriously ruthless head of the SCU, saleened him from the darkness. He moved with a liquid grace that was utterly inhuman, his presence sucking the very warmth from the air. His hair was as black as polished obsidian, and his eyes, as they scanned the scene, seemed to hold the cold emptiness of a winter night. She could smell him, even from this distance, a scent of cold fir trees, ancient paper, and something else, a deep, suppressed power that smelled like ozone before a lightning strike. Damien's gaze swept the room, missing nothing. He issued a series of clipped, quiet commands to his team, his voice a low baritone that cut through the cavernous space. Then he stopped, his head tilted slightly, an almost imperceptible movement. His unnervingly sharp eyes scanned the shadows, and Celine knew, with a primal certainty, that he'd sensed her. "The area hasn't been secured," he stated, his voice calm but laced with ice. "We have a civilian." It wasn't a question, it was a declaration. Celine decided it was better to face the devil on her own terms. She stepped out from behind the pallets, her arms crossed over her chest, her expression deliberately neutral. Damien's eyes locked onto hers. There was no surprise in them, only a cold, predatory assessment. He took in her worn leather jacket, her combat-ready posture, and the silver wolf head pendant hanging from her neck. "Celine Fang," he said. Her name wasn't a question either. It was an identification. A file being pulled from a mental cabinet. "Private investigator, formerly of the Crescent Moon Pack. You're contaminating my crime scene." "Your crime scene was contaminated the moment your officers trampled through it," she shot back, her voice level. "I, on the other hand, know how to walk without disturbing evidence." One of the uniformed officers took a step toward her. "Ma'am, you need to." Damien raised a single, elegant hand, and the officer froze. The vampire prince never took his eyes off Celine. "My team is the best in the city. If there was evidence here, they would have found it." A bitter laugh almost escaped her. "Your team is looking for footprints and shell casings. They're searching for things they can see. The killer didn't leave anything you can see." She took a step closer, deliberately entering his personal space. She saw a flicker of something in his dark eyes. Annoyance, perhaps, or was it intrigue? "They left something you have to smell." He remained perfectly still, a statue of aristocratic disdain. "And I suppose you, a lone wolf operating out of a shoebox office, have smelled it." The condescension in his tone was a razor blade. She refused to let it cut her. This was the moment, her only leverage. "Yes," she said, her voice dropping, becoming conspiratorial. "It's faint, underneath the bleach your killer used to cover their tracks. A perfume, something artificial. It smells like dead roses and the chemicals they use to preserve bodies." She watched him closely. For the first time since he'd entered, his mask of icy control slipped. It was just a micro-expression, a slight narrowing of his eyes, a subtle tightening of his jaw, but it was there. He knew, or he knew of it. He'd heard about this clue before. He recovered instantly, a fanciful theory. "Is it?" Celine pressed, pushing her advantage. "This is the third wolf to turn up like a discarded juice box. The third crime scene scrubbed with bleach. I'm willing to bet it's the third time this exact scent has been left behind. A scent your state-of-the-art forensic lab can't detect and your high-tech sensors can't analyze. But I can. It's a signature." They stood inches apart now. The tension between them was a physical thing, a crackle of static in the damp air. She was a wolf, he was a vampire. Natural enemies locked in a battle of wills over a dead body. It was the oldest story in Viridia City. He was silent for a long moment, his gaze so intense it felt like a physical weight. She could feel him assessing her, weighing his options. He could have her arrested for trespassing, throw her out, and try to replicate her findings with his own resources. but they both knew he couldn't. This clue was uniquely hers, tied to her very biology. Finally, he spoke, his voice a low murmur that was somehow more menacing than a shout. "You're a complication, Ms. Fang. I'm your only lead, Detective Valerius." He held her gaze for another beat, then gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod. He turned his back to her, addressing one of his subordinates. "Get a statement from her, and then escort her out." Celine's heart sank. He was dismissing her. After all that, fury, cold and sharp, rose in her throat. She opened her mouth to argue, to fight, but Damien turned his head slightly, speaking over his shoulder without looking at her. "My office, 8 a.m., he commanded, the words sharp as broken glass. "Bring everything you know, and don't be late." He didn't wait for a reply. He strode further into the crime scene, his black coat swirling behind him like a cape, leaving Celine standing in the cold, her victory tasting suspiciously like a trap. The headquarters of the Supernatural Crimes Unit was a monument to sterile order. A gleaming steel and obsidian tower that pierced the perpetual gray sky of Viridia's financial district. It was the architectural opposite of everything Celine stood for. It was a cage, polished and pristine, and she felt the primal urge to claw at its smooth, unblemished walls. She strode through the automated glass doors, her worn combat boots a defiant scuff on the gleaming marble floor. The air inside was recycled and cold, stripped of any organic scent, leaving only the faint hum of electronics and the smell of industrial-grade cleaner. Humans and the occasional vampire officer moved with quiet, purposeful strides, their faces impassive. A wolf in this place was an anomaly, a glitch in the system, and every eye she passed seemed to register her presence with a flicker of suspicion. Damien's office was on the top floor, accessible only by a private elevator that required his unique biosignature. His assistant, a severe-looking woman with her hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch the skin over her cheekbones, ushered Celine in with a look of profound disapproval. The office was exactly the contradiction she had expected. One wall was a floor-to-ceiling panoramic window, displaying Viridia City below like a sprawling circuit board. A massive minimalist desk of dark wood and chrome dominated the space, its surface clear save for 3 shimmering, holographic data screens. It was the command center of a modern prince. But the other walls were lined with bookshelves filled with ancient leather-bound tomes. Their spines, embossed with faded gold leaf, hinted at centuries of knowledge. A single, exquisitely rendered oil painting, a dark, brooding landscape from some long-dead master, hung in stark contrast to the hyper-modern technology. This was the den of a creature ancient beyond measure. Damien Valerius stood by the window, his back to her, looking down at his city. He was a silhouette of power against the morning light. "You're punctual," he said, without turning. "An admirable, if rare, quality in your kind. Don't mistake my desire for answers for a desire to please you," Celine said, stopping in the center of the room. It felt like stepping onto a chessboard where he already knew every move she could possibly make. He turned slowly, the movement fluid and deliberate. Today, the suit was a charcoal gray that made his eyes seem even darker. He gestured to one of the 2 severe, uncomfortable-looking chairs in front of his desk. "Sit." She remained standing. "I'm fine here." A flicker of annoyance, so fleeting she might have imagined it, crossed his features. He moved to his desk and sat, the picture of composed authority. With a flick of his wrist, one of the holographic screens detached from its stand and floated across the desk toward her, stopping just within her reach. Images and text scrolled across its translucent surface. Crime scene photos, preliminary autopsy reports, victim profiles. "As you can see," Damien began, his voice the cool, detached tone of a lecturer, "the official data is limited. The perpetrator leaves no traceable DNA, no fingerprints, no material evidence of any kind. The victims were all Crescent Moon Pact members, between the ages of 20 and 30, all healthy. all taken without any signs of a struggle from their point of origin. Celine ignored the hologram and kept her eyes locked on him. You already knew about the scent, didn't you? He didn't flinch. We had notations of an unidentified airborne chemical agent at the first two scenes. Our sensors could detect a foreign compound, but couldn't analyze its composition. We classified it as an anomaly. An anomaly, she scoffed. You mean you couldn't put it in a test tube, so you ignored it? I don't ignore anything, Ms. Fang. I prioritize actionable intelligence, he countered smoothly. Until last night, your scent was not actionable. Now it is. And so are you. He tapped a command onto his desk's integrated interface. A thin black data slate slid out from a hidden slot, gliding silently to a stop in front of her. On its screen was a legal document. A contract, he explained. Standard procedure. It outlines your compensation, your responsibilities, and a rather comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. Sign it, and you will be granted provisional access to our files. You will report directly to me. All findings, theories, and leads you generate will become the property of the SCU. Celine picked up the slate. The language was dense, suffocating. Clauses about jurisdiction, chain of command, absolute secrecy. It was a leash elegantly worded. She leaned forward, resting her hands on the edge of his massive desk to read the fine print, deliberately invading his carefully controlled space. And then she smelled it. It was subtle, buried deep beneath the crisp scent of his tailored suit and the cold, clean fragrance of fur and old paper that seemed to cling to him. But it was there, the faintest, most aristocratic whisper of dried roses and something ancient, like dust from a forgotten tomb. It wasn't the same chemical reek from the crime scene. This was different. It was organic. The source, the original fragrance from which the killer's artificial perfume was a cheap, synthetic copy. Her blood went cold. Her head snapped up, her eyes narrowing on his. He was watching her, his expression unreadable, but his nostrils flared almost imperceptibly. He could smell the change in her, the sudden spike of adrenaline, the scent of suspicion. Is he the killer? The thought was a lightning strike in her mind. No, impossible. The scent was different, older, as if he'd been marinating in it for centuries, while the killer had merely dabbled. It was the scent of his heritage, the scent of his family. Her voice was a low growl when she spoke. This isn't a consultant contract. It's a muzzle. It says I work for you. It says I report to you. It says I hand over my instincts and my nose and let you decide what's actionable. It's called procedure, Damien said, his voice dropping an octave, a hint of steel entering his tone. It's how we prevent chaos. You run around the city chasing ghosts based on smells. You contaminate evidence. You alert our target. My way, we gather data. We build a profile. We move with precision. And we close the case. Your way has gotten 3 wolves killed. She shot back, her control finally snapping. She pushed the data slate back across the desk with enough force to make it skid. I'm not signing your leash, Valerius. You want my help? Then I'm not a consultant. I'm a partner. We share everything. No secrets, no information hierarchy. My instincts, your resources, together. Otherwise, I walk out that door and find this son of a bitch myself. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. The holographic screens hummed quietly, displaying the faces of the dead. Damien's jaw was a hard line, his eyes burning with a cold fire. He was a prince, a creature of absolute control, and she had just thrown his control back in his face. He was about to refuse. She could see it in the tightening of the muscles around his mouth. He would have her thrown out, her access revoked, and he would try to find another way. Just as he opened his mouth to deliver her sentence, a soft chime emanated from his desk. Detective Valerius. A crisp female voice said through the intercom. Apologies for the interruption. We have a development. A possible witness to the abduction of the second victim. A goblin fenced down in the lowtown named Flicker. He's terrified. He says he saw a black, unmarked vehicle. He refuses to come in, and he says he won't talk to any SCU suits. His words, sir. He says he'll only talk to someone who understands the street. Celine held Damien's gaze, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her lips. She didn't have to say a word. The universe had just said it for her. Damien stared at her, his expression a mask of cold fury. All his data, all his resources, all his authority, and his only viable lead was cowering in an alley, waiting for someone exactly like her. He was cornered. He leaned back in his chair, the sound of his sigh a quiet admission of defeat. He pressed a button on his desk. Tell him we're sending someone. An associate. He looked at Celine, his eyes dark with reluctant concession. Fine, Fang. We'll try it your way. For now. The words sounded like they were being dragged from him over broken glass. It seems we're taking a walk. Try not to get your chaotic methods all over my investigation. Don't worry, Prince, she retorted, the smile never leaving her face. I'll try to keep the chaos to a minimum. No promises, though. He rose from his chair, grabbing a long black coat from a stand. The game had just changed. He might still be the king, but she had just forced his hand, and for the first time, taken a piece of his board. The low was the city's grimy, beating heart. A labyrinth of narrow streets wedged between the crumbling brick of old factories and graffiti-scarred tenements. It was a place the gleaming towers of the financial district pretended didn't exist. The air here was a rich, chaotic stew of scents. Frying noodles, damp earth from the cracked pavement, ozone from a flickering neon sign, and the ever-present, cloying sweetness of goblin-brewed moonshine. This was Celine's territory. She moved through the throng of goblins, trolls, and down on their luck humans with an easy, confident stride. The locals gave her a wide berth, their gazes a mixture of respect and fear. They knew who she was. The wolf who walked alone, the one who couldn't be bought and couldn't be intimidated. Damien, by contrast, was a walking wound in the fabric of the lowtown. His immaculate charcoal suit and polished leather shoes were an insult to the grit and grime around them. He moved with a stiff, aristocratic bearing, his face a mask of controlled distaste. Every goblin peddler, every troll bouncer, stopped and stared. He wasn't just an outsider. He was the law, the authority they spent their entire lives trying to evade. His presence was like a hawk circling a pigeon roost, putting everyone on edge. Relax, Valerius, Celine murmured without looking at him, her voice low. You look like you're about to sentence the entire block to be sanitized. I'm considering it, he replied, his tone clipped. His gaze swept over a goblin selling what looked suspiciously like shrunken heads. This level of disorganization is offensive. It's called life. It's messy, she shot back. And if you want Flicker to talk, you need to lose the Lord of the Manor Act. Try to look like you're not mentally cataloging every health code violation. He didn't reply, but she saw the muscles in his jaw tighten. They found Flicker's stall tucked away in an alley that smelled powerfully of stale beer and desperation. It was a chaotic pile of junk, or as Flicker called it, pre-owned artifacts of indeterminate origin. Broken electronics, tarnished silverware, and mismatched pieces of jewelry were heaped on a threadbare carpet. The goblin himself was a bundle of nerves, his large, pointed ears twitching, his bulbous eyes darting back and forth. He spotted Damien first, and a pathetic squeak escaped his thin lips. He immediately tried to duck behind a stack of rusted metal plates. Flicker, Celine called out, her voice calm and even. The goblin froze, then slowly peeked over his barricade. His eyes widened in recognition, then relief. Fang. By my grimy gold, it's you. He scurried out, wringing his long, knobby-fingered hands. His gaze flickered nervously to Damien. Who's the suit? He smells expensive and cold. He's with me, Celine said, deliberately positioning herself between Flicker and the vampire. It was a subtle act of protection, a signal the goblin understood instantly. He's just here to listen. We heard you saw something a few weeks back. The night Boro went missing. Boro had been the second victim. Flicker's face paled to a sickly green. Saw. No. Heard things. Bad things. You don't see things in the lowtown if you want to keep your eyes. Then tell me what you heard, Celine prompted, her tone gentle. This was a delicate dance. Push too hard, and he'd clam up forever. The goblin wrung his hands harder. It was late. Past Moon Eye. A vehicle. Not a normal one. It was quiet. Too quiet. An electric engine, maybe. Black. No markings. A coal truck, like for transporting meat. His voice dropped to a terrified whisper. I heard a sound from inside. A muffled cry. Wolf scent on the air, thick with fear. Then it was gone. Vanished down the alley toward the old cannery road. Did you get a look at the driver? Celine asked. No, I was hiding. You think I'm crazy? Flicker shuddered. But I heard them talking. Two of them. One said something about the shipment being feisty. The other one mentioned a name. A place. He called it the Crimson Cage. Crimson Cage. The name sent a chill down Celine's spine. It sounded like a club, or something worse. It was their first concrete lead. She was about to ask another question when she felt it. A subtle pressure in the air, a faint mental hum. It was like the feeling of someone staring at the back of her neck, but inside her head. Her gaze snapped to Damien. He was standing perfectly still, his eyes fixed on Flicker, his expression one of intense concentration. He was using his power, his mind whisper, trying to pry into the goblin's thoughts, to verify the information, to dig for more. A low growl rumbled in her chest, an involuntary, predatory sound. Flicker whimpered, one hand flying to his head. My head feels fuzzy. In 2 strides, Celine was in front of Damien, her body physically blocking his line of sight to the goblin. She got right in his face, her voice a furious whisper. What did I tell you? She snarled, her amber eyes blazing. Don't use your vampire tricks on my witness. Damien's focus broke. His eyes cleared, the predatory intensity receding, replaced by a familiar, cold annoyance. I was merely verifying his testimony. Fear can muddle memory. I was ensuring its purity. You were violating him, she corrected, her voice dangerously low. He came to us, he's terrified, and you're trying to crawl inside his brain like a parasite. That's not how we do this. We build trust, something you and your kind wouldn't understand. The insult hung in the air between them. They were nose to nose, the animosity a palpable force. He was a creature of power and control, used to taking what he needed. She was a creature of instinct and loyalty, defending her own. My tricks, as you so crudely put it, have solved more cases than your street-level sympathies ever will, he retorted, his voice a silken threat. Not this one, she said, not backing down an inch. Before their standoff could escalate further, Flicker, seeing his chance, yelped, That's all I know, I swear, and scrambled back into the deepest recesses of his stall, pulling a grimy tarp over himself. The interview was over. Celine held Damien's glare for a moment longer before turning away in disgust. She tossed a few heavy silver coins onto Flicker's table. For your trouble, and for the headache. She stalked out of the alley, her fists clenched. Damien followed a pace behind, the sound of his expensive shoes a mocking counterpoint to her angry strides. You got what you wanted, he stated, his voice devoid of apology. The name of a location. My method was efficient. Your method was a violation, she repeated, spinning to face him in the middle of the crowded street. You don't get it, do you? People like Flicker, they don't talk to people like you because you see them as tools, as data points. They talk to me because they know I see them as people. You just proved their point." He was about to offer another cold, logical rebuttal when her senses screamed a warning. The scent of ozone, sharp and artificial. The low hum of a high-powered electric engine, the one Flicker had described. Her head whipped around. Further down the street, half hidden by the afternoon shadows, was a black, windowless van. It was just sitting there, engine idling silently. It hadn't been there a minute ago. They had been watched. A new scent hit her, carried on a sudden gust of wind. It was the smell of controlled wolves, a foul mix of their natural musk, fear, and the acrid tang of compulsion drugs. And under it all, the faintest trace of rot and roses. "They know we talked to him," she said, her voice dropping to a deadly calm. "They're here to clean up the loose end." Damien's eyes followed her gaze, and his posture shifted instantly. The arrogant detective vanished, replaced by the lethal predator. "They're not just here for him." As if on cue, her phone, tucked into the inner pocket of her jacket, vibrated. She pulled it out. A single text message from an unknown, encrypted number. "They know you as keyed. Ruin." At that exact moment, the black van's engine revved, no longer silent. Its tires screeched on the pavement as it hurtled directly toward them. A 2-ton metal bullet aimed at erasing a witness and the 2 investigators who had found him. There was no time for a plan. No time for the strategic analysis Damien craved or the predatory assessment Celine preferred. There was only the roar of the electric engine, the scream of tortured tires, and the primal, instinctual imperative: survive. "Move," Celine yelled, shoving Damien toward the narrow opening of the alley they had just exited. He didn't need telling. For all his aristocratic stiffness, the vampire moved with supernatural speed. He was a black-clad blur, already in the alley's mouth as Celine dove in behind him, the van's fender missing her by a hair's breadth. It smashed into a stall of goblin-made trinkets, sending a shower of cheap metal and splintered wood into the air. The Lowtown erupted into chaos. Screams echoed off the brick walls as vendors and patrons scattered like startled rats. The van screeched to a halt, blocking the alley's main entrance. Its side doors slid open with a menacing hiss. 3 figures leaped out. They were wolves. Celine knew it instantly from their scent and the lupine grace of their movements. But they were wrong. Their eyes held a glassy, unfocused sheen, and their mouths were flecked with foam. Drugged. Puppets sent to do their master's bidding. Their essence and rage enhancers, Celine growled, falling into a low fighting crouch. "They'll have the strength, but no finesse. Look for the hesitation in their eyes before they strike." "Informative," Damien said, his voice dangerously calm. He shrugged out of his suit jacket, tossing the expensive garment aside with casual disdain. Underneath, he wore a crisp white shirt and a holster that hugged his torso, a sleek, silver-plated handgun resting in it. He didn't draw the weapon. "I, however, prefer a more direct approach." The first drugged wolf charged, a hulking brute with knotted fists. He threw a wild punch aimed at Celine's head, a blow that could have easily caved in a human skull. Celine didn't meet the force head-on. She flowed around it, a dancer avoiding a clumsy partner, using the wolf's own momentum to spin him off balance. As he stumbled past, she drove her elbow sharply into the base of his skull. He grunted and staggered, momentarily stunned. Simultaneously, the other 2 converged on Damien. It was a fatal miscalculation on their part. They likely saw a slender, well-dressed vampire, a creature of parlors and politics. They did not see the prince of the city's deadliest coven. Damien met their charge not by retreating, but by advancing. He moved with a speed that made Celine's enhanced senses struggle to keep up. He ducked under a sweeping hook from one attacker and, in the same fluid motion, drove the heel of his palm up into the man's chin. The crack of bone was sickeningly loud. As the first wolf collapsed, Damien pivoted, his hand shooting out to catch the wrist of the second attacker. What happened next was a brutal display of vampire strength. Damien didn't just stop the punch, He twisted, and Celine heard another sharp snap as the wolf's wrist broke. The wolf howled in pain, but the drugs in his system forced him to keep fighting. He swung his good arm, and this time, Damien allowed the blow to connect, catching it on his forearm. A mistake. A flash of silver. Celine saw it glinting on the wolf's knuckles. Dust. Not a solid weapon, but a coating. Silver dust. Damien hissed, a sharp, angry sound of pain, and recoiled, a smoking, blackened line appearing on the sleeve of his white shirt. The scent of burning vampire flesh, acrid and unnatural, filled the air. Seeing the prince wounded, the wolf Celine had stunned roared and turned on Damien, joining his companion for a 2-on-1 assault. "Valerius!" Celine shouted. Anger, cold and pure, surged through her. These weren't just attackers, they were wolves, her people, twisted and used as disposable weapons. And they had hurt her partner. The thought was unexpected, but it fueled her rage. She launched herself forward, no longer holding back. Her movements became sharper, more feral. She dodged a clumsy grab, her fingernails hardening, lengthening into short, sharp claws. She raked them across the face of the wolf with the broken wrist, drawing blood. He roared, more in surprise than pain, and swiped at her. She ducked under his arm, grabbed the back of his collar, and slammed his head into the unforgiving brick wall. He went down in a heap and didn't get back up. One left. The brute who had first attacked her was now solely focused on the injured Damien. He sought his chance, lunging at the vampire with a knife that seemed to appear from nowhere, its blade coated with the same shimmering silver dust. This time, Celine knew she wouldn't be fast enough. But Damien wasn't helpless. Despite the burning pain in his arm, his eyes blazed with cold fury. As the wolf lunged, Damien moved. He didn't dodge. He met the attack, his left, uninjured hand clamping down on the wolf's knife-wielding wrist like a vice. The wolf grunted, trying to force the blade forward, but it was like pushing against a steel statue. "You rely on poison," Damien said, his voice a low, deadly whisper that was somehow audible over the chaos. A coward's tool. With his other hand, he reached out, not to strike, but to gently cup the side of the wolf's head. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. Then the wolf's eyes widened in horror. His body went rigid, the knife falling from his nerveless fingers and clattering on the ground. A thin trickle of blood seeped from his nose. Damien had bypassed the physical fight entirely. He was inside the wolf's mind, showing him things, breaking him from within. The wolf collapsed, unconscious before he hit the pavement. Silence descended on the alley, broken only by the distant sounds of sirens growing closer. Celine stood breathing heavily, her adrenaline slowly receding. Damien stood over the fallen wolf, his right arm held stiffly at his side, the black burn on his sleeve stark against the white fabric. Their eyes over the bodies of their attackers. A new understanding passed between them. They had seen each other in action, raw and unfiltered. They had seen each other's strengths and vulnerabilities. He had seen the feral grace of her fight, and she had seen the cold, terrifying lethality behind his aristocratic facade. And he had taken a silver-laced blow that had been meant for her. The thought settled in her chest, heavy and unfamiliar. She took a step toward him, her voice rough. "Your arm." "It's a superficial injury," he said, his tone dismissive, though a thin sheen of sweat on his brow betrayed the pain. "Silver is never superficial to your kind," she countered. "And don't give me that 'I'm fine' bullshit. I can smell the damaged tissue from here." The sirens were getting closer, almost on top of them. The SCU would be here any second. This entire alley was now a contaminated crime scene, and they were at the center of it. "We can't be here when they arrive," she said decisively. "My place. It's close. We can get off the street." He looked from his arm to her, his expression unreadable. He was a creature who was always in control, and right now he was injured, exposed, and being given orders by a wolf he barely tolerated. "Lead the way," he said, The words clipped. It was the closest he would ever come to admitting he needed help. Celine's apartment was a converted loft above a defunct textile factory, a cavernous space of exposed brick, steel support beams, and towering, multipanned windows that overlooked the low town's chaotic rooftops. It was her sanctuary, a place of solitude and function. A large workbench littered with dismantled electronics and case files dominated one wall, while a worn leather sofa and a rack of heavy weights occupied another. The only personal touches were a small, thriving herb garden on the windowsill and a single faded photograph on her nightstand. A smiling young woman with silver hair, her arm thrown around a handsome young man who shared her amber eyes. Liam. Damien entered the space with a slow, deliberate survey, his senses taking in every detail. He seemed out of place again, a figure of dark, tailored elegance amidst her utilitarian clutter. The bleeding from his arm had stopped, but the blackened burn on his sleeve was a stark reminder of the alleyway fight. "Sit," Celine commanded, pointing to the leather sofa. It was a clear echo of his own command to her in his office, and a faint, almost imperceptible smirk touched her lips as she said it. He inclined his head, a silent acknowledgement of the irony, and sat. He moved stiffly, the pain clearly more significant than he let on. Celine went to a heavy, military-style footlocker in the corner and opened it. It was her private apothecary. Inside were rows of carefully labeled jars containing dried herbs, poultices and salves, a mix of ancient wolf lore and modern first aid. She pulled out a small stone bowl, a pestle, and a few glass jars. She worked with quiet efficiency, crushing silverweed into a paste and mixing it with a base of powdered moonpetal and moss. The resulting poultice was a dark, earthy green, and its scent, a clean, sharp smell of deep forest and damp earth, began to fill the loft. "Take off your shirt," she said without looking up from her work. He hesitated for a fraction of a second. "That won't be necessary. The healing process has already begun." Celine finally looked at him, her gaze flat and unimpressed. "Don't be an idiot, Valerius. Your kind heals fast, but not from silver. It acts as a poison, retarding your natural regeneration. Unless you want that arm to be useless for a week, you'll let me treat it." She held up the bowl. "This will neutralize the silver and speed up the process. Now, are you going to be stubborn, or are you going to let me help you?" A silent battle of wills waged between them. For him, this was an act of submission, of entrusting his well-being to a natural enemy. For her, it was, she wasn't sure what it was, a debt repaid for the blow he took for her, a simple professional courtesy, or something else. With a sigh that was pure, aristocratic exasperation, he acquiesced. He carefully unbuttoned his cuffs and then the front of his shirt, pulling the ruined garment off. Celine's breath caught in her throat. She had expected him to be pale, perhaps slender beneath the suit. She had not expected the toned, corded muscle of a warrior honed over centuries. His skin was the color of cool marble, but it was marred by a latticework of faint, silvery scars, ancient and faded, telling tales of battles long past. The new wound was an ugly, black gash on his forearm, the flesh around it blistered and angry. She forced herself to focus, moving to kneel on the floor in front of him. "This is going to sting." She dipped her fingers into the poultice and, without further warning, applied it to the burn. Damien, a sharp hiss escaping his lips. His entire body went rigid, his hands clenching into fists on his knees. The scent of his pain spiked in the air, sharp and metallic. But he didn't pull away. He endured it, his jaw tight, his eyes closed. Celine worked quickly, her touch surprisingly gentle as she spread the salve over the entire wound. She was so close to him now, the heat radiating from his body a stark contrast to his cold skin. She could smell the complexity of his scent in a way she never had before. The cold fur and old books were still there, but underneath, there was something more. The faint, metallic tang of ancient blood, the subtle fragrance of night-blooming flowers she couldn't name, and that deep, underlying scent of heritage. The scent of withered, timeless roses. It was intoxicating and dangerous. When she finished, she looked up and found him watching her, his dark eyes intense. The pain had subsided to a dull throb, and something else was taking its place. An awareness. The space between them felt charged, the air thick with unspoken things. He was in her home, wounded, half-dressed, vulnerable in a way she never imagined he could be. And she, who trusted no one, was tending to him, her hands on his skin. He broke the silence, his voice a low rasp. "Your scent." In the alley, it changed when I was struck. She froze, her hand still on his arm. Adrenaline. It was a weak lie. "No," he said, his gaze unwavering. It was more than that. It was possessive. The way a wolf smells when defending its territory. He paused, letting the observation hang in the air, or its pack. Her heart hammered against her ribs. He saw too much. He sensed too much. She pulled her hands back as if burned, rising to her feet and putting distance between them. "You were my partner," she said, her voice strained. "And you were compromised." It was a tactical assessment. "Was it?" he murmured, his eyes never leaving hers. Before she could form a reply, he suddenly winced, his gaze dropping to his own chest. His hand went to his breast pocket, where his phone had been. A low, continuous hum was emanating from it. "What is that?" Celine asked. He pulled out his phone. The screen was black, but it was vibrating erratically. He frowned, tapping the screen. "It's not my phone. This was planted on me." He pried the back of the phone case off. Tucked inside was a small, wafer-thin metallic disc, a faint blue light pulsing in its center. A tracker, a very sophisticated one. "They weren't just trying to kill us," Celine breathed, the realization dawning on her. "They were tracking you, which means they know where we are right now." As if to punctuate her words, a floorboard creaked in the hallway outside her loft's door. It was a soft sound, almost imperceptible, a sound no human would have ever heard. But they both heard it. They were no longer alone. The fight wasn't over. It had followed them home. The sound was a whisper of wrongness in the sanctuary of her home. The subtle groan of old wood under a weight that didn't belong. Celine's muscles coiled, her body instantly shifting from caregiver to predator. Her gaze shot to the heavy steel door of her loft, the single point of entry. Damien was already moving. The pain from his arm seemed forgotten, erased by the pure, cold focus of a creature honed by centuries of survival. In a single, fluid motion, he was on his feet, his bare torso a pale gleam in the dim light. He didn't reach for his gun. Instead, his eyes, now burning with a dangerous, crimson-tinged light, darted around the room, assessing angles, exits, and threats. "One, maybe two," he murmured, his voice a low vibration that was felt more than heard. "They're trying to be silent, but their heartbeats are agitated. Amateurs. Amateurs sent by professionals," Celine countered in a whisper, grabbing a heavy, tire iron-like crowbar from beside her workbench. It felt solid and reassuring in her hand. "The tracker led them here. They think you're injured and alone. An assumption we will use against them," he said. A chillingly feral smile touched his lips, a fleeting expression that transformed his aristocratic features into something far more dangerous. He picked up his discarded suit jacket from the floor. From an inside pocket, he produced not a weapon, but a small, exquisitely crafted silver lighter and a thin, elegant cigarillo. Celine stared at him. "You're picking a hell of a time for a smoke break, Valerius." "Yes, patient Fang," he whispered, his eyes gleaming with cunning. He didn't like the cigarillo. Instead, he deftly broke it in half, letting the dark, fragrant tobacco spill into his palm. He walked silently to the massive windows that overlooked the lowtown. With a flick of his wrist, he unlatched one, sliding it open just a crack. Supernatural hearing is a double-edged sword. It can be overstimulated. He held the tobacco to his lips, and with a short, sharp puff of air, blew the fine particles out the window and into the hallway beyond. Then, with the same preternatural calm, he clicked the silver lighter. Once, twice. The sharp snick of the flint striking steel was unnaturally loud in the tense silence. Outside the door, the soft footsteps faltered. The steady, agitated heartbeats stumbled. Celine's enhanced hearing picked up a muffled curse. The hunter's senses were being assaulted. The powerful alien scent of the tobacco would be clogging their noses, masking the smells of their targets, while the sharp metallic clicks of the lighter would feel like gunshots to their oversensitive ears. It was a brilliant, simple piece of sensory warfare, a prince's gambit. "They're disoriented," Damien stated, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "Now they will be angry. They will be sloppy." He turned to her, and in that moment, they were no longer a vampire and a wolf. They were two predators, united in the hunt. "The door is reinforced steel. They won't breach it silently. They'll have to use force. When they do, you take the left. I'll take the right." Celine gave a curt nod, her knuckles white around the crowbar. Her heart was hammering, but it was the familiar, exhilarating rhythm of the fight. There was a terrifying clarity to these moments, a purity of purpose that stripped away all the complexities of their partnership. Here, there were no species politics, no procedural arguments. There was only the enemy and the person at your back. They didn't have to wait long. A heavy, muffled thump hit the door, followed by the screech of stressed metal. They were using a hydraulic ram. Amateurs, my ass, Celine thought. These were well-equipped amateurs. THUMP. The steel door buckled inward. Crash. The door flew off its hinges, slamming into the opposite wall with a deafening boom. Two figures, clad in black tactical gear and wearing night vision goggles, spilled into the room. They moved low and fast, fanning out exactly as Damien had predicted. But they were expecting one injured target. They got two prepared hunters. The wolf on the left barely had time to register Celine's presence before she was on him. She moved with explosive force, the crowbar swinging in a brutal, horizontal arc that connected with his knee. The crack of bone was sickeningly audible. He screamed and went down, his assault rifle clattering to the floor. She didn't give him a chance to recover, bringing the crowbar down again in a sharp, disabling blow to his shoulder. On the right, Damien was a specter of violence. He moved in a way that seemed to defy physics, a blur of motion that the second attacker couldn't track. The wolf raised his weapon, but before he could acquire a target, Damien was on him. The vampire's hand shot out, not for the gun, but for the man's head. He grabbed the tactical helmet and simply tore it from the wolf's head, goggles and all, with a screech of rending straps. Blinded by the sudden transition from the goggles' green-tinged darkness to the loft's ambient light, the wolf staggered back, disoriented. It was all the opening Damien needed. He delivered a single, precise strike to the man's throat with the edge of his hand. The wolf collapsed, choking and gasping, his weapon useless. The entire confrontation had taken less than 5 seconds. Celine stood over her disabled opponent, chest heaving, the crowbar held at the ready. Damien stood over his, a figure of deadly calm. He looked at the two incapacitated wolves on the floor, then his gaze rose to meet hers. The crimson glow in his eyes slowly faded back to their normal, fathomless black. "Efficient," was all he said, a faint hint of approval in his tone. "You weren't so bad yourself," she admitted, lowering the crowbar. For a guy in a fancy suit. The moment of shared victory was shattered by a sudden, sharp pain in Celine's side. She gasped, looking down. A small feathered dart was embedded in the thick leather of her jacket. It hadn't pierced her skin, but a faint, sweet-smelling liquid was already seeping into the material, a tranquilizer. Her eyes snapped up. The third figure, standing in the ruined doorway, half hidden in the shadows of the hall. This one was smaller, quicker, and they held a compact crossbow. Before Damien could react, before Celine could even raise her weapon, The figure in the doorway raised a hand, not to shoot again, but in a universally recognized gesture. Wait. The figure stepped fully into the light. It was a woman, her face obscured by a hood and a scarf, but there was no mistaking her scent. Wolf. But beneath that, something else. Fear and desperation. "I don't want to hurt you," the woman said, her voice tight and strained. The crossbow was still aimed at Celine, but it trembled slightly. "Just give us the vampire. Our employer wants him alive." "Your employer sent you here to die," Damien said, his voice like ice. He took a half step, placing himself partially in front of Celine, a subtle, protective gesture that did not go unnoticed. "Our employer pays well," the woman shot back, her resolve hardening. "He wants the prince. He doesn't care about you, Fang. Walk away. This isn't your fight." "You sent killers to my door," Celine growled, ripping the tranquilizer dart from her jacket. "You made it my fight." This was it. A standoff. The woman was outmatched, but she was desperate, and a desperate wolf was unpredictable. "There is no version of this where you walk out of here," Damien stated calmly. "But there is one where you live. Tell us who you work for. Now." The woman laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "And betray the only person who offered my family a way out. Never." She tensed, her finger tightening on the crossbow's trigger. Celine saw the shift. The woman wasn't aiming at her anymore. She was aiming at Damien. In that split second, Celine made a choice. She didn't think. She acted. She lunged forward, not at the woman, but at Damien. She slammed into him, knocking him off his feet, the two of them tumbling to the ground in a tangle of limbs, just as the crossbow fired with a sharp thwack. The bolt whizzed through the air where Damien's chest had been a second before and embedded itself deep in the plaster of the wall behind him. Celine landed on top of him, her body shielding his. Her face was inches from his, her breath warm against his skin. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. All she was aware of was the solid muscle of his chest beneath her, the startled look in his dark eyes, and the chaotic, mingled scent of their adrenaline. The woman in the doorway stared, shocked by the turn of events. A wolf protecting a vampire. It was unthinkable. That moment of hesitation cost her. With a grunt, Damien reversed their positions, rolling so that he was on top, his larger frame now shielding her. He was still holding the silver lighter. With a flick of his thumb, a flame roared to life, unnaturally bright in the dim room. "Leave," he commanded, his voice a low, terrifying promise of violence. The woman, seeing her advantage lost and her two partners incapacitated, finally broke. She gave them one last, conflicted look, then turned and vanished back into the shadows of the hallway. Damien didn't pursue. He extinguished the flame and remained where he was, his weight pressing Celine into the floor. His injured arm was braced beside her head, his face just above hers. The immediate threat was gone, but a new, far more complicated tension had taken its place. "You just took a crossbow bolt for me," he stated, his voice a quiet rumble that vibrated through her. "You took a silver-laced punch for me," she countered, her voice breathless. "Looks like we're even." His eyes searched hers, looking for something she couldn't name. The cold, analytical detective was gone. The imperious prince was gone. In his place was someone else, someone who looked at her not as a tool or a complication, but as an equal who had, without hesitation, thrown her body in front of his. "No," he said softly, his gaze intense. "I believe you're one ahead." He didn't move. And Celine, pinned beneath the most powerful and dangerous man she had ever met, found that she didn't want him to. The moment stretched, thick and heavy with unspoken implications. Pinned beneath Damien, Celine was acutely aware of everything. The solid weight of him, the heat radiating from his skin, the complex scent of ozone and ancient roses that was uniquely his. Her heart, which had been hammering with adrenaline, slowed to a powerful thudding rhythm against her ribs. He had shielded her, after she had shielded him. The primal, instinctual part of her brain registered the act not as a tactical maneuver, but as something far more significant, a reciprocal claiming of responsibility. His gaze was still locked on hers, intense and searching. The air crackled. He was too close, his presence overwhelming her senses. With a grunt of effort, she pushed against his chest. "All right, Prince," she said, her voice huskier than she intended. "I think the imminent threat of death has passed. You can get off me now." For a second, she thought he might resist. Then the mask of the cool, controlled detective slid back into place. He pushed himself up with effortless grace, rising to his feet and offering her a hand. She ignored it, getting to her own feet and brushing the dust from her clothes. The intimacy of the moment was shattered, but the memory of it lingered in the air like an electrical charge. While Celine quickly and efficiently bound the two unconscious wolves with heavy-duty zip ties from her workbench, Damien retrieved his phone and made a call. His voice was low and clipped, a string of commands issued with absolute authority. "I have 2 packages for sanitation. My location, unmarked vehicle." 10 minutes, he said, then ended the call without waiting for a confirmation. He looked at the 2 bound figures. "Sanitation?" Celine asked, raising an eyebrow. "A discreet private service," he replied smoothly, slipping his phone back into his jacket. "They will be taken to a secure holding facility. We will find out who they are and who sent them." He walked over to the wall and pulled the crossbow bolt from the plaster with a sharp tug. He examined its tip. No poison, but the fletching. "This is custom work." Celine came over to look. The feathers were from a rare breed of mountain hawk, dyed a deep crimson, a signature. "So our desperate assassin has expensive taste." "Or her employer does," Damien corrected. He turned to face her, his expression serious. "They knew where to find me. They knew I was a vampire. The woman in the hall, she knew your name. Fang. They weren't just hunting a prince. They were hunting this investigation, which means they know we have a lead. The Crimson Cage." Celine leaned against her workbench, crossing her arms. "And now they know we can fight back. They'll be more careful. Getting inside that club just got 10 times harder." "Precisely," Damien agreed. He began to pace, the restless energy of a caged predator radiating from him. He put on his ruined shirt, leaving it unbuttoned, seemingly indifferent to the exposed skin or the angry burn on his arm, which was already looking less inflamed thanks to her poultice. A frontal assault is out of the question. And a standard undercover operation is now compromised. They know our faces. They will be looking for an SCU detective and his lone wolf consultant. He stopped pacing and turned to her, his dark eyes holding a new, calculating gleam. "So, we won't give them that." Celine waited, a sense of unease creeping up her spine. She knew that look. It was the look of a master strategist about to move a critical piece on the board. "They are looking for a partnership based on law and order," he continued, his voice taking on a persuasive cadence. "We will give them one based on decadence and deviancy. They are looking for cops. We will show them clients." It took her a second to understand. When she did, a harsh laugh escaped her. "Oh no, no way, Valerius. Absolutely not." "Think about it," he pressed, taking a step closer. "The Crimson Cage caters to the darkest appetites of the supernatural elite. Cross-species liaisons, forbidden power plays. It's a marketplace for taboo. What is more taboo, more intriguing to that clientele, than a vampire prince taking a beautiful feral wolf as his new acquisition?" The way he said the word acquisition made the hair on her arms stand up. It was both insulting and, to her disgust, strangely thrilling. "You're insane," she said, shaking her head. "First of all, I am nobody's acquisition. Second, that's not an undercover op. That's a suicide mission. They'll see right through it." "Will they?" he challenged, his voice dropping to a low, intimate murmur. He was standing in front of her now, boxing her in against the workbench. We have a built-in animosity that will read as the intoxicating friction between master and pet. We have a shared history of violence that will pass for passion. Tonight, in this room, we fought together. We bled together. We protected each other. There it is, a chemistry between us, Ms. Fang. The volatile, undeniable chemistry. We can either let it be a liability, or we can weaponize it. Her breath hitched. He was right. And the fact that he was right infuriated her. He was laying their strange, magnetic connection out on the table, dissecting it with cold logic and proposing to use it as a tool. "And what's the cover?" she demanded, trying to find a flaw in his insane logic. "I'm not just going to show up on your arm like some trophy." "Of course," he said smoothly. "You are not a trophy. You are a test of boundaries. I am Damien Valerius, a prince chafing under my father's old world rules. I have grown bored with the pale, simpering courtesans of my own kind. I seek something wilder. I have found you, a disgraced wolf of pure lineage, cast out from her pack. You are defiant, you are dangerous, and you have agreed to a mutually beneficial arrangement. I give you protection and a taste of the luxury you've been denied. You give me the thrill of the forbidden." He painted the picture so vividly, so convincingly, that for a moment she could see it. It was a perfect lie because it was woven with threads of truth. "It's the only way in," he said, his voice a final, compelling whisper. "They will be watching for the detective and the PI. They will never suspect the decadent prince and his new plaything. We will hide in plain sight." Celine stared into his eyes, her mind racing. It was a reckless, dangerous, utterly mad plan. It required a level of trust between them that they hadn't earned, and a performance that could get them both killed if they made a single mistake. It meant walking into the heart of the enemy's territory, not as cops, but as participants. But he was right. It was the only way. Her brother's face flashed in her mind. The dead wolves in the morgue. The scent of rot and roses. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was a hunt. And she was the only one who could follow the trail. "Fine," she bit out, the word tasting like surrender and defiance all at once. "I'll be your goddamn plaything." A slow, triumphant smile spread across Damien's face. It was the smile of a predator that had just cornered its prey. And for the first time, Celine wasn't entirely sure if he was talking about their enemies or her. "Excellent," he said. "Our first date is tomorrow night. We have a lot to prepare. First on the list," he added, his eyes sweeping over her worn jacket and tactical pants with undisguised disdain, "is a new wardrobe. You can't walk into the Crimson Cage looking like you're about to raid it." Before she could retort, the sound of a heavy, unmarked vehicle idling on the street below reached them. His sanitation team had arrived. The game had been set. The pieces were in motion, and Celine had just agreed to play the most dangerous role of her life. The boutique Damien chose was not merely a store, it was a sanctuary of obscene wealth. Tucked away on an exclusive cobblestone street in the city's vampire-controlled Onyx Quarter, Nocturne had no sign, no window displays, only a single lacquered black door with a silver handle shaped like a sleeping bat. The moment they stepped inside, a chime, softer than a sigh, announced their arrival. The interior was dimly lit, draped in velvet and silk, smelling of expensive leather and rare night-blooming orchids. The proprietor, a vampire so ancient his skin had the translucence of fine porcelain, glided toward them. His eyes, the color of old blood, flickered over Celine with a connoisseur's appraisal, then landed on Damien with a deep, respectful bow. "Prince Valerius," he hissed softly. "An unexpected pleasure. How may we serve you?" "Etienne," Damien acknowledged with a curt nod. "My associate requires a new presentation. Something for an evening at the Crimson Cage." Etienne's eyebrows, thin as razor strokes, rose a fraction. The name of the club was clearly a key, unlocking a specific hidden collection. "Ah, A bold choice of venue. It requires a statement, something that speaks of both elegance and availability. His gaze on Celine was now frankly insulting, sizing her up like a piece of livestock. Celine's hand twitched. The urge to show him exactly how available her claws were was almost overwhelming. Damien, sensing her rising anger, placed a light but firm hand on the small of her back. The touch was both a warning and, unexpectedly, a reassurance. Play the part. She requires something that accentuates her natural assets. Damien continued, his voice a silken purr as he played his own role to perfection, but with an edge. She is not a pet to be coddled. She is a wolf, and I wish her to look it. For the next hour, Celine was subjected to a whirlwind of fabrics. Silk that felt like water, leather as soft as a second skin, velvet that drank the light. She was prodded, measured, and draped by Etienne and his silent assistants. It was a humiliating process, made worse by Damien, who sat in a plush armchair, sipping a dark, crimson liquid from a crystal glass, watching her every move with an unnerving proprietary intensity. He rejected dress after dress with a flick of his wrist. Too demure, too vulgar, too human. Finally, Etienne returned with a single garment bag. Perhaps this will be to your satisfaction, my prince. The dress was a masterpiece of lethal elegance. It was forged from a material that looked like liquid smoke, a dark, shimmering gray that shifted to silver under the light. It was cut high on the neck, but plunged daringly low in the back, leaving most of her toned, scarred skin exposed. The dress clung to her body like a shadow, its hemline cut aggressively high on one thigh. It was a warrior's gown, a dress that promised both pleasure and pain. When Celine emerged from the fitting room, the boutique fell silent. She saw her reflection in a dark mirror and barely recognized herself. The dress transformed her. She was no longer just a fighter hiding in practical gear. She was a weapon, polished and on display. She turned to face Damien. His glass was frozen halfway to his lips. His mask of cool detachment had vanished, replaced by a raw, unguarded look of pure appreciation. He said nothing, but his eyes said everything. They traced the lines of the dress, the curve of her back, the hint of old scars, and the look in them was a dangerous cocktail of desire and possession. The air in the room grew thick, charged with the same energy that had filled her loft after the fight. "That one," he finally said, his voice a low growl. "We'll take it, and shoes to match." Later that night, the crimson cage pulsed like a diseased heart in the city's underbelly. From the outside, it was an unmarked, black brick warehouse. But the moment the hulking troll bouncer waved them through, they were plunged into a world of sensory overload. The music was a heavy, hypnotic beat that vibrated through the floor. The light was a deep, sinful crimson, punctuated by strobing white flashes that made everyone look like figures in a fever dream. The air was thick with the scents of expensive perfume, spilled alcohol, and a dozen different species, all mingling in a heady, decadent mix. Vampires with eyes like chips of ruby lounged on velvet couches, surrounded by enthralled humans. Shifters, bears, cats, serpents, moved with predatory grace on the dance floor. Fae, with their dangerously beautiful faces, watched the chaos from shadowed alcoves. This was the place where the powerful came to shed their public skins and indulge their darkest impulses. Damien was in his element. Dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit with a blood-red silk shirt, he moved through the crowd with an aura of absolute authority. He was not a guest. He was royalty inspecting his domain. Celine, walking beside him in her killer dress and impossibly high heels, felt 100 pairs of eyes on her. On them, Damien's hand rested possessively on the bare skin of her lower back, his thumb drawing slow, deliberate circles. The touch was for show, a part of their cover, but it sent shivers down her spine. "Remember the story," he murmured, his lips close to her ear, his breath a cool tickle against her skin. "You are unimpressed by the glitter, but intrigued by the power. You are here on my terms, but you are not broken. Let them see the fire in your eyes. A hulking vampire with a scared face and the build of a bare-knuckle boxer blocked their path. His eyes roamed over Celine with greasy familiarity. Valerius, didn't expect to see you slumming it. And who is this lovely creature? Did you finally get tired of porcelain dolls? Damien's smile was pure ice. Rorik, still polluting the air. I see. He pulled Celine closer, his hand tightening on her back. This is Luna, and she is with me. So I suggest you redirect your gaze before you lose the ability to see altogether. The threat was delivered with silken smooth civility, but it had the impact of a physical blow. Rorik's sneer faltered. He saw the cold promise in Damien's eyes and took a half-step back. No offense intended, Prince, he grumbled before melting back into the crowd. It was a power play, and it worked. The message was sent. She was his. Untouchable. They made their way to a secluded, elevated booth that overlooked the entire club. From here, they could see everything. The VIPs, the dealers, the watchers. Celine's senses were on high alert, her brain processing a flood of information. She cataloged the faces of the powerful, the whispers of deals being made, the scent of the compulsion drugs being subtly passed around. And underneath it all, she searched for the one scent that mattered. Rot and roses. A server, a young man with the dazed, hollowed-out eyes of a long-term blood thrall, approached their table. Prince Valerius. An honor. Your usual. Of course, Damien said. He then looked at Celine. And for my guest, bring her your finest. The server returned with 2 glasses, one for Damien, filled with the same dark crimson liquid from the boutique. The other, for her, was a beautiful amber-colored whiskey. She picked it up, but before she could drink, Damien stopped her, his fingers gently closing around her wrist. A word, ice, little wolf, he whispered, his eyes locked on hers. In a place like this, never accept a drink you haven't seen poured. And never, ever, let your guard down. He took the glass from her hand, swirled it, and took a small, delicate sip. He held the liquid in his mouth for a moment, his expression unreadable, then swallowed. It's clean, he pronounced, handing the glass back to her. Celine stared at him, her heart doing a slow, heavy tumble in her chest. He had just tasted her drink for poison. It was a gesture of profound, almost archaic protection. A gesture from a prince to his consort. Their fake relationship suddenly felt terrifyingly real. She took a sip of the whiskey, the fiery liquid doing nothing to calm the storm brewing inside her. She could feel the eyes of the entire club on them, watching, speculating. They were the evening's main event, the vampire prince and his wild wolf. As she scanned the crowd below, her gaze landed on a figure moving through the VIP section. It was the wolf from her old pack, the one she had seen at the smaller blood slave demonstration. He was talking to a cloaked figure, his demeanor subservient. The cloaked figure turned slightly, and for a fleeting second under the strobe lights, Celine caught the glint of a signet ring, a ring bearing the crest of the Valerius Coven. Her blood ran cold. The corruption in her pack was directly connected to Damien's family. At that moment, a new scent drifted up from the dance floor below. It was faint, almost completely masked by the overwhelming perfume of the club. But it was there, chemical, cloying, the scent of rot and roses. Someone involved in the murders was here. Tonight. She looked at Damien, her eyes wide with urgency. He saw the look on her face and immediately understood. The game was over. The hunt was on. Down there, Celine said, her voice a low, urgent murmur that was nearly swallowed by the club's pounding music. She didn't point. She didn't dare. She just angled her body slightly, her gaze fixed on a shadowy corner of the dance floor, near the sound booth. I smell it. Damien's posture didn't change, but a subtle shift in his aura told her he was now on high alert. His eyes, dark and fathomless, scanned the area she had indicated. Describe the target. I can't see one, she admitted, frustration lacing her tone. The scent is drifting, not localized. It's like someone walked through there a few minutes ago. It's fresh, but fading. Then we can't afford to wait for it to come to us, he said decisively. He stood, his movement a fluid command for her to follow. He extended a hand to her. It seems my new pet is in the mood to dance. His voice was a smooth drawl, loud enough for anyone in the neighboring booths to overhear. It was part of the act, but the feel of his cool, strong fingers closing around hers was undeniably real. She let him pull her to her feet, her body moving with a reluctance that perfectly suited her role as the defiant wolf. He led her down the steps from the elevated VIP section and into the writhing, pulsing heart of the club. The dance floor was a sensory minefield. The crimson lights painted everyone in shades of blood and shadow, and the music was a physical force, vibrating through the soles of her feet and into her bones. Scents assaulted her from every direction. Sweat, expensive alcohol, vampiric ozone, and the musky undertones of dozens of shifters. Isolating the faint trail of rot and roses here would be like trying to find a single drop of poison in a churning river. I'm losing it, she murmured, her senses overwhelmed. There are too many competing scents. Then focus. Damien's voice was a firm command in her ear. He pulled her flush against him, his arm wrapping securely around her waist, forcing her into the rhythm of the music. Close your eyes. Block out the noise. Let the hunt guide you. You are the predator here, Luna, not them. His use of her street name was deliberate, a reminder of the feral, instinctive creature she was beneath the designer dress. His body was a solid anchor in the chaos, his controlled movements guiding hers. It wasn't a dance, it was a slow, predatory sweep of the area. One of his hands rested firmly on her bare back, the other held her hand, their fingers laced together. They moved as a single, dangerous unit. She did as he said. She closed her eyes, shutting out the distracting strobing lights. She let the music fade to a dull background thrum, and she focused her entire being on her most powerful sense. She filtered, sorted, and discarded. Sweat, perfume, blood wine, fey glamour. Ignore, ignore, ignore. And then she found it. A faint, ethereal thread of the scent she craved. It was coming from their right. That way, she breathed, her eyes snapping open. He navigated them through the throng of bodies with unerring grace. With every step, the scent grew stronger. It was leading them toward a curtained-off alcove, guarded by two massive, troll-like figures. This was a private area, even more exclusive than the VIP section they had just left. As they neared, a small group of vampires exited the alcove, laughing amongst themselves. In their wake, the scent of rot and roses billowed out, sharp and potent, before being quickly swallowed by the club's atmosphere. One of the vampires, a tall, gaunt male with slicked back hair and cruel, thin lips, met Celine's gaze. A smug, knowing smile played on his lips. He was practically marinating in the scent. This was their man. Celine tensed, a low growl threatening to build in her chest. Damien's hand tightened on her back, a silent command to stay in character. Don't, he whispered, his lips brushing her temple. He wants a reaction. He's testing us. The gaunt vampire sauntered over, his eyes dripping with condescension. He stopped in front of Damien, completely ignoring Celine. Valerius, the vampire sneered. I heard you'd picked up a stray. I didn't realize she was pure blood. Such a waste. The mongrels are so much more pliable. Lefebvre, Damien's voice was lethally smooth, a layer of ice over a boiling sea of contempt. Still peddling your chemical filth to those with more money than sense, I see. I'm surprised you haven't poisoned yourself by accident. Lefebvre's smile tightened. My filth is the future. A way to enhance the experience, to unlock the full potential of a donor. He finally deigned to look at Celine, his eyes slithering over her in a way that made her skin crawl. A prime specimen like this one. The essence that could be extracted, it would be exquisite. Celine felt Damien go rigid against her. The casual, predatory way Lefevre spoke of extracting essence from her was too close to the truth of their case. It was a confession, wrapped in a boast. This was the source. This was the monster they were hunting. "She is not a donor," Damien said, his voice dropping to a deadly quiet. "She is mine, and you will address her with respect, or you won't be addressing anyone at all, ever again." Lefevre laughed, a high, unpleasant sound. "Possessive, are we? How quaint. Let's see how loyal your new puppy is." Before anyone could react, Lefevre moved with reptilian speed. He reached out, not for Damien, but for Celine. His long, cold fingers brushed against the side of her neck. It was a test, a challenge, an act of profound disrespect in the rigid hierarchy of supernatural society. Celine's control snapped. Her reaction was pure instinct. She didn't think. She moved. Her hand shot up, grabbing Lefevre's wrist in a grip of iron. Her nails, which had been perfectly manicured, elongated into sharp predatory claws, digging into his pale flesh. He gasped, more in shock than pain, at the speed and strength of her response. "Touch me again," she snarled, her voice a low, feral growl that cut through the music, "and you'll be pulling that hand out of your own throat." The immediate area around them fell silent. Dancers stopped, their eyes wide, drawn to the sudden, violent confrontation. Lefevre stared at his wrist, where 4 perfect, crimson crescents were welling up with his own dark blood. Damien didn't move to intervene. Instead, a slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. He looked at Lefevre, his eyes blazing with a mixture of pride and warning. "I did tell you she had an edge." The facade was perfect. The jealous prince, the fiery wolf, the insolent rival. It was a scene straight out of the decadent fantasies the club's clientele paid to witness. They had just turned a direct confrontation into the best floor show of the night. Lefevre, realizing he had miscalculated and was now the subject of public humiliation, ripped his wrist from her grasp. He shot Celine a look of pure venom. "You'll regret that, bitch," he hissed. "I'm counting on it," she shot back. He turned and stormed off, disappearing back into the crowd, leaving the lingering scent of his artificial perfume and his fury in his wake. The music swelled again, the crowd's attention slowly dissipating. The moment had passed. Damien pulled Celine back against him, his lips close to her ear once more. This time, his whisper was not part of the act. It was real, and it was filled with a chilling intensity. "Well done," he breathed. "You've marked him. Now he's angry. And he's sloppy. He will make a mistake." He paused, his hand tightening almost imperceptibly on her back. "But you have also made yourself his primary target. From now on, you don't leave my sight. Not for a second." His words were a commander's order, but they felt like a vow. A wolf's promise, spoken by a vampire prince. As he backed toward their booth, Celine was acutely aware that their cover had just become their reality. She had willingly painted a target on her back, and in doing so, had bound herself to the one man who was powerful enough to protect her, a man whose family was deeply entangled in the very conspiracy they were trying to destroy. The dance was over, but the dangerous music was just getting louder. The drive back from the Crimson Cage was a silent, tension-filled affair. The adrenaline from the confrontation with Lefevre had ebbed away, leaving a residue of cold fury and disquieting intimacy. Celine sat staring out the window of Damien's sleek, black car, the city lights blurring into streaks of neon. The feel of his hand on her back, the low murmur of his voice in her ear, the terrifying reality of their shared danger. It was all replaying in her mind on a loop. He hadn't spoken a word since they'd left the club, his focus entirely on navigating the dark, rain-slicked streets. But the silence wasn't empty. It was charged, filled with the weight of what they had discovered and the perilous performance they were now trapped in. They didn't go back to the SCU headquarters. Instead, Damien drove them to a location Celine had never been to before. A discreet, high-tech safe house masquerading as a luxury penthouse in one of the city's most anonymous glass towers. "My private office," he explained as he led her inside. "Fewer eyes and ears here, more secure." The space was as minimalist and controlled as his SCU office, but more personal. A state-of-the-art forensics and data analysis station was set against one wall, its multiple screens glowing in the darkness. On another wall hung a collection of antique weaponry, swords, daggers, and crossbows, each one a museum-quality piece that looked lethally functional. It was the workspace of a man who was both a modern detective and an ancient warrior. "Let's review what we know," Damien said, his voice all business. He shed his suit jacket and immediately went to the data station, his fingers flying across a holographic keyboard. "Our killer, or at least our chemist, is a vampire named Alistair Lefevre. He deals in a chemical compound that smells of synthetic roses and formaldehyde, a compound he claims can unlock the full potential of a donor." "Extracting essence," Celine added, the words leaving a bitter taste in her mouth. She was still in the ridiculously expensive dress, feeling both exposed and powerful. "That's what this is about. They're not just killing these wolves, they're harvesting something from them." "Precisely." A complex diagram appeared on the main screen, showing the molecular structure of the compound they had detected at the crime scenes. "I had my lab analyze the sample from the first warehouse. It's a sophisticated neuroalchemical agent. It seems designed to suppress a wolf's healing factor while simultaneously stimulating the production of what our ancient texts call anima limna, the lunar essence, the very life force of a wolf tied to the moon. Celine felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. And what would a vampire want with wolf essence? Damien's expression darkened. Power. For a vampire, consuming pure lunar essence is a forbidden practice, a dark legend. It's said to grant a temporary but immense surge in strength, speed, and even healing, far beyond what blood can provide. It's a shortcut to power, but a highly unstable and addictive one. It all clicked into place. The disappearances, the methodical draining, Lefevre's monstrous boasting. This wasn't just murder. It was a supernatural drug ring, and young, healthy wolves were the raw material. "And the buyers?" Celine asked, her voice tight. Damien pulled up another set of files on the screen. Financial records, encrypted transactions, a web of shell corporations and offshore accounts. Lefevre is the producer, but he's not the kingpin. The money trail is complex, but the primary holding company that finances his labs is a subsidiary of Valerius Enterprises. He said the name without flinching, but Celine heard the undercurrent of cold fury in his voice. He had just implicated his own family, his own father. "The signet ring I saw," she breathed, the pieces connecting in her mind. "On the man talking to the wolf from my old pack, Gregor. It was your family's crest." "Gregor," Damien repeated, his fingers tapping another command. A personnel file appeared. Gregor, a senior enforcer in the Crescent Moon Pack. A list of his known associates. His financial records showed a series of large, anonymous cash deposits over the last year. He's the supplier. He identifies the targets within his own pack. Strong, pure-blooded wolves with few close ties, whose disappearance might go unnoticed. He arranges the abductions. "My pack and your father," she stated, the accusation hanging heavy in the air. She walked to stand beside him, forcing him to look at her. Two ancient, powerful houses working together in the shadows. A pact of treason against their own kind. "It would seem so," Damien said, his voice a low growl. He met her gaze, and for the first time, she saw the full weight of the burden he carried. He was not just a detective hunting a monster. He was a son confronting the sins of his father, a prince facing the corruption of his entire kingdom. In that moment, a wave of empathy, unexpected and powerful, washed over her. She knew what it felt to be betrayed by those who should have protected you. She knew the loneliness of being the only one willing to see the ugly truth. "Why?" she asked, her voice softer now. "Why would they do it? Your father is already one of the most powerful vampires in the world. The Pack Alphas have their own power. Why this?" "Because their power is fading," Damien said, turning back to the screen. He pulled up historical data, census numbers, economic charts, records of influence. "My father and his generation, they are ancients. Their power is vast, but it is also stagnant. The world is changing. Newer, younger covens are rising. As for the Wolf Alphas, they fear their traditions are dying. They see their young wolves leaving for the human world, their bloodlines thinning. This grotesque trade, it's a desperate grasp for control. A way to artificially bolster their strength and eliminate any potential rivals who don't adhere to their old ways." He gestured to the screen, to the web of conspiracy. "This isn't just about power, Fang. It's about fear, the fear of becoming irrelevant." They stood in silence for a long moment, the glowing screens illuminating the dark, ugly truth they had unearthed. They were standing against the weight of centuries of tradition and corruption. "My brother," Celine said, her voice barely a whisper. "Liam. He must have found out about this. About Gregor. That's why he disappeared." Damien's expression softened with something that looked almost like compassion. He brought up another file, one that was heavily encrypted. It was his own private, ongoing investigation file. The title was simply, "Liam Fang." "I never believed he was a runaway," Damien said quietly. His SCU profile showed a fiercely loyal, brilliant investigator. His disappearance was anomalous. "I've been looking for him, off the books, since I took over the unit." Celine stared at the screen, at the notes Damien had compiled, the leads he had followed, the dead ends he had hit. He had been searching for her brother, long before she had ever walked into that first crime scene. He hadn't told her. It wasn't a strategic move. It was a quiet, solitary quest for a truth that his own organization had tried to bury. The last vestiges of her distrust for him crumbled away, replaced by a complex, powerful emotion she couldn't yet name. They were no longer just partners bound by necessity. They were allies, bound by a shared betrayal and a common cause. "He's not dead," she said, her voice filled with a conviction that was absolute. "I would have felt it. They're holding him somewhere. He knows too much. He's the key to bringing this all down." "Then we will find him," Damien vowed. His hand came to rest on her shoulder, a gesture of solidarity, no longer part of an act. His touch was cool, but it sent a current of warmth through her. "We will find him, and we will burn their entire rotten enterprise to the ground." She looked up at him, at the fierce determination in his eyes, at the prince who was willing to declare war on his own father, on his own history, for the sake of justice. And she knew she was no longer alone in this fight. But the truth of their situation was also terrifyingly clear. To expose the conspiracy, they had to get closer to its heart. They had to continue their masquerade, to walk among the monsters, pretending to be two of them. Their dangerous proposition had just become their only path forward, a path that would lead them deeper into the darkness together.